Anyone who has been with my channel for any amount of time knows that we have two distinct lines of investigation. One, of course, being the issue with the USS Fitzgerald and the USS McCain and the other DDGs that were compromised last summer. And, of course, the submarine cable issue with it, and most recently the spoofed transponder that we have proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that was aboard the ACX Crystal. The other line of investigation that we have been covering deals with Central and South America and the coming conflict for Panama. The Panama Canal is the single most important geographic structure in the Western Hemisphere, bar none. Controlling it controls the economies of this hemisphere. There are people in Venezuela and in Colombia who have designs on reuniting that region. Now, I have never been able to unite both of these lines of investigation until today. About this time last year, there was a story that widely went unreported other than by the Miami Herald. And it's this one. Sorry about that. You see, February of last year, three very high-ranking Marines, were drugged and robbed. And a lot of people got a good laugh out of it. They're all married, and usually this is something that is reserved for the younger ranks, and these guys were way up the chain. And these guys had access to all sorts of information. The one thing you need to remember about burundanga poisoning is not that it just knocks you out and then someone can do whatever, rob or whatever. It turns you into a zombie. It turns you into something less than a human and makes you very vulnerable and susceptible to suggestion. And these men were as follows: Marine Colonel Roger T. McDuffie, Harrier pilot and Chief of Operations for Marfor South. Major Andrew L. Mueller, described as Theater Security Cooperation Planner, and Major Mauricio Sáenz, Exercise Planner. These were the guys that for 12 hours in Colombia were under the influence of unknown parties and had their sensitive electronics, Pentagon-issued electronics, stolen and compromised. Mueller's work laptop and iPhone 6 were stolen, as were his personal iPad and iPhone. That's the security coordinator. McDuffie, the Chief of Operations, work iPhone 6, as well as his personal iPhone, iPod, and cash were also stolen. Now, strangely enough, the only person who got out of this with nothing was Sáenz, and he was downstairs drinking and having a good time. He wasn't poisoned. And in another video I've tied him to the Philippines, strangely enough the same area where the captain of the ACX Crystal was from. Now, you still say, what does this have to do with the issue with the Fitzgerald? This was February of last year. If you make the allegation that someone attacked the Fitzgerald, they would have needed to know when the Fitzgerald was going to be and where and when and how it would be possible. This couldn't possibly have been just some random crew out there at night who just happened to spy a destroyer and decided to turn to ram it. This had to have been a planned event. Just like Benghazi was. A planned event. Not an accident. Not the result of some video. That bullshit story is the same as this bullshit story. And I'm going to read to you a little bit here about what they call burundanga. Scopolamine provides a potent weapon to Colombian criminals. The drug puts people into a zombie-like state in which they lose both their memory and free will and can be convinced to empty their bank accounts or hand over the keys to their apartments and cars, or in this case, hand over passwords and access to military, sensitive, high-level military naval information. which the Marine commander of Marfor South would have had access to. Deployment plans, the ways to, I mean, the compromise here cannot be understated. The breach in security here cannot be understated. This drug is no joke. Tasteless and odorless, the drug is often slipped into alcoholic drinks of unsuspecting bar patrons. Last year, Colombian police reported nearly 1,200 cases of people victimized by criminals using scopolamine and other so-called zombie drugs. The victims range from high-profile politicians to U.S. Embassy employees to average Colombians. The drug has few legitimate medical uses, such as treatment for motion sickness and for the tremors of Parkinson's. That's another thing in itself. So this shows Nazi angel of death. Joseph Mengele used scopolamine in interrogations as kind of a truth serum. So that could have been done. These Marines were out of contact, whereabouts unknown for 12 hours while this was going on. Okay, now follow me here. This happened. This was in February. All of a sudden, then we had the issue with the Lake Champlain. Then we started to see North Korea start firing off missile after missile. Then we had the issue with the Fitzgerald. And the things that we've now been able to prove about the ACX crystal, the commander, or the captain, I should say, of the ACX crystal being from a place called Bislik in the Philippines, the southern part of the Philippines where ISIS is very prevalent. And then we have this that we covered. The Venezuelan narco state being in cahoots with Hezbollah. The vice president of Venezuela is a Syrian Druze. His name is Tariq El-Aissami. In his role, prior to becoming the vice president, he was charged Ministry of the Interior, a function down there called ONIDEX, O-N-I-D-E-X, that is in charge of the comings and goings of immigrants into Venezuela. He was proven to have given Hezbollah fighters tens of thousands of Venezuelan passports during his time there. And they are down there right now in Colombia, eastern Colombia, western Venezuela. There really is no border there, moving with these fighters. And this is where this happened last February. It is not unlikely that these high-level, command-level Marines were targeted by Hezbollah or targeted by ISIS. And they were secured, their electronics were secured, and anybody who knows anything about iPhones or iPads knows that your biometrics they had access to as well. For that 12 hours, God knows what could have been revealed. And they wouldn't have any memory of what they revealed. And then we see that we have one of the member of these three, this Mauricio Sanz, who seemingly wasn't targeted. Then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose over near the Philippines, where, strangely enough, this guy's from. There are no coincidences, folks. This wasn't reported in the mainstream media, but it happened. And it was never acknowledged, and it was buried because I think they also agree that the compromise and the breach cannot be understated. I know I've said that twice now, but it can't be. The amount of information that would have been able to be accessed by the chief of operations of Marfor South, a full bird colonel, Marine, and his theater coordination planner, a lieutenant colonel, I believe, would have been a gold mine for these guys. And that's why I started with this, because this story, this movie from 1988, was based on a real thing that happens down there. And this could very well be how the crew of the ACX Crystal would have known when and where that ship was going to be and how to target it and how to effect that kind of an attack. Just another strange coincidence, folks. Just another strange coincidence. and things that you won't hear in the mainstream media. That only takes a little bit of digging and being able to comprehend what this stuff means. It's a frightening thing. What else could be coming? And I'm not absolving these officers of their behavior. Had they followed the guidelines for servicemen in Colombia, they would have never been in this position to begin with. But this is more about, less about them cheating on their wives and breaking protocol and disobeying direct orders than it is now about compromising the safety and the security of the United States of America. And these guys very well might have 20 dead sailors on their hands. And in case anybody wants a root of that number, 10 from the McCain, 7 from the Fitzgerald, and there was the issue with the Normandy and the issue with the Statham, both mysteriously, magically having sailors go overboard and go missing, one off of Cherry Point, North Carolina, and one just only a few miles off of Subic Bay, and they never recovered the bodies, and they were never found. In one of the cases, another sailor visually watched the guy go overboard, and they still weren't able to recover the body, remains or anything, after days and days and days of search. So I just wanted to cover this because this puts the two issues together, this zombie drug. And Iran and all sorts of other bad actors have had designs on Venezuela, Colombia for a very, very long time. And we covered this article before in another video. And even, and I'm glad I remember this, James Munder himself even picked this up and talked about this. And this is JewishPolicyCenter.org. Venezuelan narco-state meets Iran-backed terror. And it talks about the connections between the two and how exposed the U.S. is in this region. We only have 2 small areas down there we can count on now. And one of them, if it were to fall into the hands of either the Russians or the Iranians or some other bad actor group, without U.S. forces down there to protect it, the Panama Canal would be that event that changed history. Venezuelans, I'll just read this here as we get out. Of no less concern is Venezuela's long history of collaboration with Iran, including sanctions evasion, terror finance, and ideological subversion. During the presidencies of Hugo Chavez and Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, Caracas was a key facilitator of Tehran's sanctions-busting effort. These two regimes established business ventures and financial institutions in Venezuela, which they used to launder Iranian money, procure technology, and bribe senior Venezuelan officials. And this thing that they're doing down there, where they're trying to negotiate, they're having elections coming up. If there were ever to be some kind of a deal struck that would put Tariq el-Assami, the vice president of Venezuela, in the driver's seat, can you imagine? Can you absolutely imagine? It's a possibility that with the Colombian elections coming up and the former FARC terrorist that we covered running for election, you could have a former FARC terrorist be the president of Colombia. You could have a Syrian Druze tied to Hezbollah be the president of Venezuela. And then we also, and we're going to cover it in another video, have a guy running for president in Mexico with ties to both of these guys. And I don't care how big the wall is, kids. It ain't going to stop what these guys are going to do. You can have a wall in Mexico all you want. They take the canal. They take the Panama Canal, folks, it's over for the economy of America. If they can control the boats that go through, and they can keep the U.S. military divided, we could have a West Coast military and East Coast military with no way to get back and forth other than going around the tip of South America. They could control all of the giant gas vessels and oil vessels going between China and the East Coast of the United States. And they're right there. They're literally a stone's throw away, biding their time. So I'll leave it there for you, folks. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much. The channel is doing great. I'm humbled by the polite, intelligent, thoughtful conversation that we're having. Keep it up, guys. You guys are great. We'll see you next time.